Happy President's Day, Anthony.
Happy President's Day. It's great to be in Vegas with you.
Yes, if only.
I'm Anthony. Welcome to No Vacancy Live. That's my friend Glenn.
You're watching the #1 show in hospitality.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to No Vacancy Live. Of course, I'm Glenn Hausman. That's the incredible Anthony Melchiori. It is President's Day, February 21st, 2022. But Anthony, we're like, we can take a day off, but we couldn't. We had such much great content we had to share today.
Well, let's call it what it is. You're in Vegas and and you want something to do. So I'm just something to do.
Well, honestly, dude, it's 9 a.m. here. You think I wanted something to do at 6:30 when I got up this morning to come down here and set up?
Why am I not in Vegas with you?
I don't know. Something like you've got other businesses that you're running and doing or something.
I sound so important and stuff.
You do. You actually do sound important. Now, Anthony, today's going to be a great show because we've got an absolutely fabulous guest today. We're going to learn a little bit about what's been happening for the last 15 years in entertainment, nightlife, and stuff like that in Las Vegas. And our guest, Christie, has been the center of all of that. But before we get started, Anthony, one of our guests wrote in. He got a great question. I couldn't answer it, so I thought I would set it up for you. The question is, they own a small hotel in St. Thomas, and every year they bring their elderly mother with them on each trip. And over the years, this woman has developed dementia and is no longer able to take care of herself. But the problem is they leave her in the room for long periods of time, and they go out to dinner and they do other things without her. And when they're out, the owners feel like they're on super high alert, and they're really worried that, besides the fact there's lots of laundry and garbage and lots of other stuff, they're concerned that she could fall, wander out of the room, go into the pool, or some sort of other issue. The guests don't think it's a big deal. They're very concerned about it. Would you refuse to allow them to come back even though they've been long-term guests? How would you handle that, Anthony? We can't hear you. You blocked out your sound.
I was because some alarm was going off. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
When I was running a hotel, I won't name the hotel, the Lucerne Hotel, on the Upper West Side, there was a European couple, and they asked my assistant general manager to watch their kid while they went to the bar a couple blocks away. Now, all he had to do was every hour go check on the baby. Are you ready?
I'm listening. Keep going.
All right. So every hour they had to check on the baby.
Mm-hmm.
So my assistant general manager says, "Sure, I'll check on the baby." So he calls me, or a front desk clerk calls me and says, "Hey, just so you know, so and so said that he'd watch the baby, and like every hour he's going in just to make sure the baby's okay." I was like, "Whoa!" So we called the parents, told the parents to come back and never make sure that happens again.
Right.
So our responsibility is not to take care of a person that can't take care of themselves. In this, this area, it was a child that didn't have the capacity. If this older adult doesn't have the capacity to take care of themselves, I would ask them not to leave the child in the room. And I would insist that they don't leave the child in the room. With that, the adult in the room. With that said, before I did that, I would check with my lawyer to find out what the legal obligation is or isn't. But I think they're within their right. And again, I don't know the laws of St. Thomas, believe it or not.
That's shocking, Anthony. You seem to be big focused on Caribbean law. I thought that's what you did as a minor to Hotel Impossible.
Well, actually, I have a minor in business law, but I don't have a minor in St. Thomas law. But see, you didn't know that, did you?
Oh, I didn't. For real. I thought I knew everything about you.
Yeah, and I have 3 associate's degrees and 1 bachelor degree.
What?
Yeah, and so anyway, that's what I would do. I would never allow somebody that I didn't feel they can take care of themselves in my hotel without supervision.
Excellent. I think that's a real
because they're stressed out, right? The people involved is stressed out that they want a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now you're adding stress to me because you want to go on vacation. If why not, if they're staying in the room, why not just leave the person at home? Right. Well, they can't leave them at home because they can't take care of themselves.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's pretty insane. All right. Great answer. And I hope our listener is satisfied with that. Thanks for taking care of that. Now let's bring into the show Mr. Sean Christie, CEO of Carver Road Hospitality. Sean, so great to see you, man.
Hey, great seeing both of you.
Yeah, this is great. So they just opened up, Anthony, Carver Steak, which is over at Resorts World, which you can't see, but I see it out the window over there. I was very excited for it. I've been there twice to Resorts World, but I haven't seen the restaurant open yet. I'll be staying there later this week because, Sean, besides this, we're doing a great show featuring Resorts World on Thursday. We got Devin Hashimoto, the executive chef over there. We got Michael Waltman, who's executive director at Zook Operations, and Laurie Calderon, who helped staff the place and now is community engagement. So love Resorts World. I think we're going to be kind of featuring Resorts World all week. We're actually Our Friday Night Audit show. We're going to be coming from there as well. But Sean, how cool is it opening up a restaurant in Las Vegas? And then we're going to get in the Wayback Machine and start from earlier on in your career.
Well, Las Vegas is the most exciting city in America, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I live here. But so it's, anytime you get to do a big project in a beautiful, resort like Resorts World, there's electricity around that. Also, we open around New Year's Eve, which, made it for a challenge and also a lot of fun.
I think you on December 30th you opened?
Yeah, we opened on December 30th. It was kind of like the circle the date of height of Omicron in Vegas.
Right.
We picked a good one, but worked through it now.
Well, that was the busiest week. And that was the busiest week in the hotel's business history that week.
Yes.
Believe it or not.
It was crazy busy. And Katy Perry, I believe the day before, or maybe that day, launched her residency. So kind of that energy around that, contributed to having a great and fun opening.
So so is my friend Glenn? Are you going there tonight for dinner as Sean's guest?
No, I'm not tonight.
Absolutely,
not tonight. But we'll work it out. We'll figure it out. But sometime, definitely, I think before Friday, so that way I could comment about how delicious it was on Friday Night Audit. But what the real cool thing, Anthony, is Sean's been here. I hate to age you a little bit.
Go for it.
A couple of decades.
I'm 47. Let's just get it over.
Right.
It's fine.
You've been here for a couple of decades, and I came across you. I think it was probably about 15 years ago, back before all of this, when you just opened up Blush, like the first ever type of boutique nightclub over at the Wynn, the original Wynn Resort, way before they even built Encore. So that's how far we go back. So how did you even get involved in getting to Las Vegas and being in a position to partner with someone like Steve Wynn to open up a nightclub at the beginning of what I would call the era of the nightclub revolution?
My dad, owned restaurants. I grew up in a restaurant. So there was kind of a natural segue. I wasn't, scholastic per se.
Yeah.
And hey, there's my scratch drawing. But
that's their next big restaurant, by the way. Yeah.
We're doing a restaurant in Vegas.
It's being designed for toddlers.
Yeah, it's going to be really sophisticated, as you can see with my chicken scratch. So, I worked for a company called Lions Group in Boston. They were at that time, they're still around. They're still a big company. And did clubs, restaurants, bars in Boston. Basically, they had an affiliation with the House of Blues.
Right.
And my former boss, one of my early mentors, Andy Massey, who started the Light Group, basically brought me out to Vegas to do House of Blues in Vegas when it opened in Mandalay Bay. And then, fast forward 1 year, myself and Andy and Andrew Sasson all started a company called, they brought me in, they were the partners, right? I became a partner, but Light Group, which at that time, again, in Bellagio, MGM era, post Steve Wynn, did, Light Nightclub, Fix is still there. Stack is still at the Mirage.
Fix is a restaurant, right? Is that the sushi?
Yeah. Fix is directly across from Yellowtail, Bellagio.
Right. Yellowtail's a sushi place, right?
It's kind of like a cool American hip restaurant.
Yes. Coming from the mall area, it's on the right side.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep. It's still there. It's still open. Stack. We did nightclubs. We actually did a residential tower called Panorama Towers, which, of course, is still there across from City Center. But out of that relationship, I basically moved on to start my own company. And one day, randomly, just kind of driving along the road, never had met the man in my life. I got a weird number, and it was Steve Wynn on the phone calling me.
Whoa.
Yep. And he basically said, hey, and again, I'm skipping a lot, but,
of course.
But, I got a place called Lure, Lure, and it's underperforming, and I want to meet with you because I heard you're the guy to talk to. And so I did. I met with him, and then that ended up becoming Blush.
All right. What is it like getting a phone call from Steve Wynn, who was arguably at this time at the zenith of his power and influence here in the city, and being told he had the confidence in you to do something with him?
Yeah, I mean, it was a highlight of my career. I mean, I'm telling you this story 16 years later. So, definitely struck with me. But what was interesting that day was that he had told me, I said, Mr. Wynn, I basically, I want to go home and change. I was literally going to the gym, and he pretty much told me, hey, this is like a moment. And, like the opportunity for the meeting is effectively now.
Right.
I want to see you now. And if you don't take that opportunity, like, again, in his grandiose manner, told me it was a fork in the road. I was driving on a road. And by the way, in 2006, I was over in Southern Highlands. Cell phone service wasn't that great.
Right.
Kind of cutting in and out. But the message was, come now or the opportunity's off the table.
Yeah.
So first time I met him, I was in my gym clothes, and I felt totally like that moment was a little diminished because I felt just a little underdressed.
Yeah, that's the moment where they're about to cut into your chest on the operating table, and you're like, wait a second, I'll be right back. You still get off the table. You're like, well, I cut you already. It's okay. I'll bandage it up. But that's, you used a great word, Glenn, the zenith of his power, because he was that guy. I mean, he was, I give him all the credit or a lot of the credit for today's Vegas.
Right.
He really set the bar really, 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 really high. And to this day, you walk through the Wynn Hotel and it looks like the bubble wrap came off yesterday. It's everything is
property is unbelievable still to this day.
Listen, we've all been to every hotel, and I can't tell you that I've ever seen a better functioning hotel this far out from opening day. It's beautiful.
I agree.
It's absolutely gorgeous. But can I ask you a question, Sean? You're obviously a smart guy. You've been, you've seen a lot of businesses. There's an easy way to make a living than running a restaurant, right?
Exactly. That's what they tell me. It was in my blood, though. I mean,
Listen, my friend used to run Tavern on the Green, and I used to run this little hotel on the Upper West Side. And one day I saw him doing the Easter egg hunt from Tavern on the Green in Central Park on Easter. And I knew he had children. And I called him up the next day, and I go, "You poor son of a bitch." I go, I was home with my kids, and you're rolling Easter eggs with other kids in Tavern on the Green. I love restaurants. I've run many, many of them. It's one of my least favorite functions because anytime there's a restaurant in my hotel, if we're running it, even if we're not running it, 90% of my problems are always the restaurant because it is the most challenging, difficult operation in a hotel, in my opinion. But that's not the question. The question is, you've been doing this for a while, and if the answer to this question is yes, we have to take you out of the Zoom. Okay, so be very careful how you answer this.
Camera off.
Yeah.
Did you start bottle service?
No, not at all.
You just capitalized on it.
No. Bottle service. Even when I lived in Boston, I went to Miami for what became a music conference called Ultra, which was the Winter Music Conference.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even in Miami, I remember going there as a early 20s and going to a place called the Living Room, which a lot of people in Miami will remember from the 90s. Very, very popular. And I just remember, going with a bunch of guys. We all kind of had to chip in, and there was a bottle of Jack Daniels, and you sat down, you had to buy a bottle. And so Miami had it. And then when I got to Las Vegas, and that bottle of Jack Daniels back then was even back then was about $200. Whew. And I remember coming to Las Vegas, and Andrew Sasson and Andy, Andrew had a place, Light. I forget what the address was, but he already had a place in New York that was like the hot place called Light, and a club in the Hamptons called Jet East, and they were doing bottle service. So he kind of taught me that. And even in Vegas, the precursor to bottle service had been started at places like Rum Jungle and Dre's. And so like, I think that at Light, we were the first people who made it more programmatic, meaning you could not sit down.
Right.
I think other places were capitalizing on the trend, but we kind of like made it where what wasn't an option. You couldn't just get cocktails all night.
That really transformed the economics of the nightlife scene, particularly here in Las Vegas, I'd say. Am I right in that assumption?
Yeah. I mean, it gave Vegas the ability to, basically drive revenues that created all these great places without bottle service and kind of the, these crazy prices, where people sit there and say, oh, well, if I go get a bottle of Grey Goose at the store, it's $40. But if I go to whatever nightclub it might be $700. But the only way, you can build a 30 or 40 or 50 million or 60 or $100 million establishment if that there's, economics that, support that. So that also ushered in the, kind of the big DJ era as well, because, okay, now if I have this money, I can go attract talent and pay more for talent than other marketplaces. So it started this, chain of events that, is what you're seeing today.
Right. And in the hotel business, we have hotel rooms that are supply and demand. I always tell, I've said this story many times, that you can sell steak for X amount of dollars, right? But you can sell a hotel room for $100 tonight and $100,000 tomorrow, depending on the demand. If the Super Bowl's in town. What you did was you took that bottle and you said, okay, this bottle is kind of like a hotel room. I guess when you're slower, it's going to be a little less expensive. When you're busy, because you're really not selling the bottle, you're selling the space. And in the space comes all of this environment. So you can go get a bottle of Grey Goose, go to your room and, get drunk by yourself. But how much fun is that, right? How much fun is that?
As someone who had a bottle in the room last night, it's absolutely terrific.
Well, it's the same principles. I mean, when I was an executive at Wynn, and I would sit in the, revenue management meetings. I mean, effectively it's yield management. The price of the bottle doesn't change. The price of the real estate changes based on that supply and demand economics.
Right. And it's just, and some people say that's price gouging. Well, if you want, that's not price gouging. Like I always fight listen, during the pandemic, there was price gouging and I'm against that. I'm against charging a nurse and a doctor $2,000 to stay in the room to save people's lives. That's not what I'm talking about. But price gouging when Christmas week and you have to pay $3,000 to stay in a hotel in New York City, as opposed to January 2nd, then just come on January 2nd. The lights are still up, but you won't pay $3,000, right? When I ran Nickelodeon, did the same thing in Orlando. In the summer, it was very expensive. So
there are huge support staffs that go with all these places. I mean, people don't see, these crazy entertainment contracts that you have to cut in Las Vegas. Again, you got to pay bills. I mean, if you build a $20 million steakhouse and you want to have all these great luxuries and things, that causes prices to be at a certain price point, and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's economics. And I'm not saying that, on certain weekends, things don't get crazy. But, what I would tell people is if you go to, a beach club, nightclub on Saturday of Memorial Day weekends, and they have, an A-list performer of whatever kind, if you want to sit behind the dugout for the World Series, it costs more money. But people, because, nightlife and day life, it is a newer phenomenon versus a well-established 100-year, in that example, baseball, or even more actually, there are norms that are created. And I think that, as millennials, kind of grow up, that is not new to them. And so, as generations pass, these things, become more normalized.
So we're the only generation really that said, what is this bottle service? Now everybody else, it's just what it is. Right.
Yeah. And that's interesting because do you see with the newer generation, the 22 and 23, are they willing to do that? Or are they like, listen, we're out? Or are you finding that they're down with that? Because today it's different than it was even 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like anything else, right? You, at a certain point in your life, come into money as you kind of mature in your professional careers or whatever it might be. And so when they can afford it, they will. It's just like gambling. People talk about, okay, how are we going to attract, millennials to gamble? That back in 2015 were some of the things we'd talk about in, boardrooms with Steve Wynn and things like that. Right. I mean, at the end of the day, to buy a nice car, you have to have money to buy a nice car. To have a great experience, you have to have money to, buy that experience. The thing that is different about, just younger generation is the advent of the way that you can split a check, and the norm around doing that
Good point.
actually creates an opportunity for people to kind of like trade up, and you'll see that. So you'll see places have, okay, you can't have more than, let's just say, like 4 split checks. But I can tell you in some markets, we've had places like, we have a place right next to the Jazz Arena in Utah, in Salt Lake City. And, they came to me and said, well, there's 11, this table, 11 people had 11 split checks. So, technology can help with that, things like Venmo and stuff like that. So again, I think the big difference is they have to have money, but they can get there quicker because of the advent of technology.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because watching my daughters, go out to restaurants, and they go to a nice restaurant, and I'm like, that must have been a big check. It's like, yeah, it was 8 of us, and they all Venmo'd me. Listen, today I passed by a hotel, and it had a looked like brand new SUV Rolls Royce. I didn't know there were Rolls Royces that were SUV. I had no idea. Right next to it was a Honda. Now, they don't build 1 million of those cars, but they build enough where people pay for it. You would not build a $20 million steakhouse, or they wouldn't build a $5 billion hotel in Vegas if they didn't think there was an audience for it. And I think more important now, after the pandemic, I think you're going to be busy. I think this year is going to be the busiest year of your career. And I think that's true in most hotels. Well, I'm going to guess that your restaurant is outperforming your pro forma.
Yeah, our restaurant is outperforming, what we expected.
And you've been open 7 weeks. That's amazing.
We've been open 7 weeks, which again is great. As part of being there, there's, obviously being in Resorts World has helped. Being in, in the new, flashy new resort is always a great thing to align with. And, they've got a great product there that is supplying, this awesome customer is part of it. And then I think that because the majority of the outlets opened in June, we kind of came on the heels of the success of their F&B program. And so where the operators that got there early kind of went through a lot of the trials and tribulations of just opening F&B, in general, in a very trying time, but also exacerbated by the opening of a resort in the heart of kind of COVID, that we're able to capitalize on some of their kind of hard work and stuff. So it is outperforming it. Thankfully, people do like it. And, obviously we have a long way to go also.
Yeah. So you did Blush, that found success, and that must have opened up more doors for you. What was next at that point? I think you did another one over at Wynn, right? Wasn't it like, I know, because it's your place, but wasn't that like they were trying to geared towards a little bit older audience, a little bit less of the boom, 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 and more about the cocktails?
Yeah. Well, actually, the next one after that I participated in was Society Cafe. I did that in partnership with Elizabeth Blau.
Yes. We've had a little Elizabeth Blau on before. She's the best.
She's fantastic. And so we did a really cool cafe at Encore called Society. Mm-hmm. It was kind of like one of those favorites of locals and people around. But out of that, then actually Steve approached me one day because my company, which was then Las Vegas Nightlife Group, had actually done the kind of, again, pool club at the M Resort when it opened for Anthony Marnell. And he had said, hey, you know about these pool businesses? I said, yeah, we're doing one. So we went out and about and bopped around and saw that people were leaving the Wynn Resort to go, find, and we bumped into a great customer over at Tao Beach when we were on our tour, and light bulbs started going off for him. And he brought me back to his office with DeRuyter Butler and basically said, hey, hold
on one second. DeRuyter Butler was like top designer over at Wynn Resorts next to Roger Thomas, right?
Yeah. Roger was head of design and DeRuyter and then architecture.
Right.
But really a kind of a symbiotic team, Steve, DeRuyter, and Roger. Mm-hmm. And, they had already sketched out with Roger, a basic plan that was really cool that then became, Encore Beach Club, because if you remember back then, Encore opened in the height of the recession.
Right.
And Steve wanted to activate the hotel and had been thinking about all these things. And his big idea was to blow out the porte cochere, because where Encore Beach Club sits actually was
crazy. It was a crazy construction project.
Yep. Yeah. And then basically, we all worked on it together, and of course, led by him, and built Encore Beach Club and Surrender Nightclub. And Surrender, by the way, which is the nighttime part, was really just the atrium, and there were 3 trees there. And he said, hey, if I give you this little space, can we somehow flip that into a nightclub to, continue building off the success of what had been built by Victor Dre, which was Trist and Excess. And I said, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's it's pretty incredible. Now, Victor Dre got to start with Dre's, which is still at the Cromwell underground. Of course, he's got the big one up on the roof. Those are really transformative moments then in Las Vegas with the nightlife scene, taking that day part and bringing it into the night part. I remember going to a couple of parties over at the Encore Beach Club at night. There were people in the pool, and it was just really cool, and had the gambling out there, and it was a really great open environment, and totally different than what we were seeing within the indoor club scene at that particular time. It really started to bring the outdoors and indoors together. Anthony?
You just said something. It was different. So Circa downtown now has the sports betting in the pool, and literally if you're on the 40th floor, you can watch these big screens from the pool and watch everybody have fun. And that would be my way of watching sports. Like, I would rent a really nice room and watch everybody have fun while I'm in the comfort of my room.
So sad.
On these big screens. If that tells you anything about my personality. And but is that changing things? Is that pool and the way they set up that stadium, and maybe you can do a better job explaining it. Is that changing thing? Sean, I know you know, but
he knows all about the project. But of course,
about the audience.
Downtown at Circa, they've got this absolutely incredible sports pool club upstairs. If you want to learn all about it, go Google Hotel Design Podcast and get my interview with Paul Steelman. We talk all about that. Plus, we happen to be talking about the construction of Resorts World and what it was like taking a partially built building that was for another project and completely transforming it. But Sean, he brings up a great point. We'll get back to your Carver stuff in a minute, but when it comes to sports betting now being so huge around the country suddenly, and you've got, I would say, the first volley with Circa saying, we're going to transform sports books. I think sports books and entertainment is going to really be the next big opportunity here in the city. How do you see it?
I totally agree. We have a concept in Salt Lake City that I'll come back to after, but that basically, part of the inspiration for the concept we're doing in Salt Lake City and Vegas, which is my chicken scratch behind us, is called Flanker. But when I went to Circa and saw, I worked for MGM for 2.5 years, and they've really been on the cutting edge of sports betting, obviously in America with BetMGM.
Right.
And really, that was a big moment for me to see Circa, because what they did with that pool and with their sports book and how they are, rallying around sports. I mean, look, sports is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Interestingly, the NBA All-Star Game was yesterday, and Salt Lake City is hosting it next year. And so I read an article in the Salt Lake City Tribune this morning that talked about the last time that the All-Star Game in 1993 was in Salt Lake and what it did for the economy, and kind of like what it has grown into now, which I would say an interesting quote I also read, I think it was in the New York Times, was saying, well, how big is football? And they said, well, football, basically took Sundays away from the, Catholic church.
Right.
It's become Sundays is about football now, which is interesting, because growing up Irish Catholic, Sundays was really about going to church for my family. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not trying to get into a religious thing, really just using it as an example. Mm-hmm. But it's just to say that the idea of sports and rallying around things that people like. Obviously, people like to bet. People like great food, beverage, and experience. So wrapping that into the form of and around sports, I think is honestly, in my opinion, is the next big frontier.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And
It
we'll
will
I want to get back on track, but I just want to say I never was going to place a sports bet. I'm not a gambler. I don't like sports betting. I did on UFC heavyweight championship 2 weeks ago, and I just collected my $21 yesterday. So
hey, congratulations.
they made it very, very easy, and that's why I did it. I went to a machine. I was in a casino. I put in my whatever money I bet. They made it easy. Push this, push this, push this. I pushed it. My tickets came out in 3 seconds. I gave it back to the machine when I was at the casino, and I got my $21. And they made it too easy for me.
Well, and it's also, I mean, again, fantasy sports in general, fantasy football. I mean, all of this wraps around the same idea of, sports becoming more interactive. So whether that's even betting or even for fun, I mean, you don't have to bet if you play fantasy sports. You can sign up for free. And so like this idea that games that historically could be boring, like baseball, even though I played baseball, but if you're invested in a person's performance versus, a 4-hour baseball game, and I'm waiting for that last guy to get a hit because it might win my league. I mean, again, that's why I think what they did with Circa is so smart, because, for me, that over the next decade is going to be where people start really, focusing as it relates to hospitality.
Right. And we've seen a complete transformation since you opened up Blush with the way that people want to eat, drink, and party in this city. Now we're seeing a lot more of the residencies and stuff come in, and sports and all of that. It's been very transformative. I suspect that you guys here in Las Vegas are going to get into that. Don't answer if, no big deal. But it seems to be a really smart move for you. Now, when you were president of events and nightlife for MGM Resorts International, you helped with the redevelopment over there of Monte Carlo into Park MGM, creating really cool concepts over there. I love the On the Record Speakeasy and Club, and big fan of Roy Choi and Best Friend. Amazing. For example.
Wait, is On the Record, you put On the Record together?
Yeah, in partnership with the Houston Brothers Hospitality. It was collaboration, between us. That was their concept, but we definitely worked on it
something
together.
about that, Anthony?
Let's just say right before the pandemic, I was surrounded by really, really bad influences, and they got me a little, let's just say, intoxicated. And they brought me on I went from a Cher concert to a poker table to eating Boy Scout cookies or Girl Scout cookies in the middle of the lobby to On the Record, and then all of a sudden, I won't name his name, Brian Newman, disappeared and left me in the middle of the lobby eating Girl Scout cookies.
That sounds like a good night.
I know, yeah. Right?
Yeah, so I was a little intoxicated when I went On the Record, and it felt like a dream. Like, listen, I really haven't been to, I don't go to clubs, and I haven't been to a club maybe once in my life. And I walked in, and it was the coolest place. Like, I was giddy when I left. I was giddy. I was like, that is so much fun. And all I did was walk and stare at people.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
What's also great is how you change environments. You go literally outside the door from Italy. You have this like lobby with all kinds of different people, from South Dakota to New York, and you open up a door and you're in like the coolest place on planet Earth. That's what I love about Vegas. Like the environment changes 5 feet away from the door.
I mean, that is Las Vegas, right? Yep. Vegas is about creating that memory and that wow.
Yeah. So you started Carver Road Hospitality, and the first big project to open is Carver Steak. Why go ahead and do a steakhouse when there are so many different types of cuisines that you could choose to focus on?
Well, I think it was also just about the opportunity.
Right. How did that come together?
I've known Scott Sabella for a long time.
I was about to say, were you driving down the strip to the gym and Scott calls you on the phone?
No. Actually, what happened is, all of us in Las Vegas have been watching Resorts World, built for the past 7-8 years, and the iterations of that. And, I think they had a potentially previous tenant, and I don't know what happened with COVID, but long story short, also Bart Mahoney, the vice president of food and beverage at Resorts World, again, have worked with both of them over the years, consider both of them friends. And I, through my relationship with Oliver Wharton, who did Viva, and also as a consulting partner in Carver Steak, he said, "Hey, I think there's a real shot. I'd launch the company in potentially going after the steakhouse." Going back again to my nightclub stuff, Ian Traeger, when he kind of with Studio 54, they did steakhouses. And, I watched also the evolution of kind of Mark Birnbaum and Eugene, how they pivoted out of nightlife into food and beverage. And I, watched intently about Catch and Catch Steak and how kind of people were. And then also last one, back to Circa. I guess it did have an impact on me. I watched how Circa did a really interesting take on a steakhouse, something that I, was different. And always been a big fan of Barry and the work he'd done at 9 Group and all that stuff. So felt like that there was an opportunity that, even going back to Park MGM and On the Record, I feel like people want more and less. The idea that I can, have different environments and different experiences. So steak typically with F&B is the number one performer across, especially in resorts. Right. Always, again, in my experience with MGM, if you were to circle highest grossing revenue, it was almost always steakhouses.
Wow.
Just generally speaking. And so realized that if we were going to do something that we could build something, cool that would take a lot of money, that, similar to our conversation before, what is the revenue generator that can support, bringing a world-class team on and building a world-class restaurant.
Right. And 1 second, I just want to give a quick show note. Sean mentioned the 9 Group. Those of you who don't know it, they were the ones responsible when Palms first opened and kind of transformed Las Vegas. They did a lot of the great F&B outlets. Anthony, take it away.
So how do you convince investors to invest millions of dollars in a steakhouse?
Well, the investors we have a fund, Carver Road Capital, that is a private equity fund that funds our operations, our OpCo. And so I went to them. Typically when you raise money, you have relationships with these people. We had already assembled, my partner, his name's Nelson Famadas. We'd gone to them and said, look, here's the opportunity. It's actually it's big investment. And I think that once they saw the team, Nelson and I, in the pandemic, before we had really even formed the company, had put our own money up and had already, probably had 6 or 7, members on the team, including Brian Bass, who I know Glenn knows.
Yep.
And
I've been friendly with Brian for a good 15, 20 years as well. And he'll be our guest on Friday Night Audit.
He's our CMO. And, we had already assembled 6 or 7, what I would consider best in class people. So I think that kind of with our collective track experience as a team and, we know what we're doing. I mean, we're professional and this is our turf. So what I like to do is just create experiences and fill in the gaps with, best in talent people. And so once the kind of business plan was set forth, the vision for it was set forth, and then the team, was realized and recognized, I don't think it was a very tough decision for the investors to kind of sign off on.
And I think you bring up a beautiful point is, in the book I'm writing called Building Your Personal Brand, is regardless of all the resorts you worked for and all the things that you've done in your life, you have a brand. And that's why Steve Wynn called you, because Sean gets shit done, right? That should be your tagline, right? You get stuff done.
Try.
And so regardless of what restaurant opens or closes or who you're working with, they know when you call Sean, things are going to get done, especially in the restaurant business where there's a lot of flighty people trying to make a lot of money quickly. And you just said it, you're best in class with your team. You put your own money in and you know what you're doing. You're not opening a bowling alley. You're doing what you've done for a long, long, long time. So if somebody called me and said, hey, Anthony, do you want to open up, a race car track? No, I probably could do it. I'd probably be successful at it, but I have no idea how to do it. Do you want to open a hotel? Yeah, I can do that in my sleep. It's when you do what you do for a long time, and more importantly, you have a reputation of being able to deal with the pitfalls. That's when you said the money, then people open their, allow you to do that. But a lot of people, when they look at you, they think, oh, wow, you put all your money in there. And wow, you're so lucky. What they don't realize is your lifetime in a career of you getting up early, doing the right things when no one's looking, making people money. It's your reputation that got you to the that got you in to open up that restaurant. And I think that's really important because especially with the younger generation, everybody's looking for the quick hit. Why Sean open that? I think you're so lucky. Well, because you work 80 hours a day and you do what you say you're going to do. So it's about your personal brand.
You have to look. You have to create your own luck. Luck is what you just described. It's good timing, hard work, and right place, right time.
Harder you work, the luckier you get. Is my favorite quote. Harder you work, the luckier you get.
1,000%. And the other thing is I'm a big fan of, again, going back to Steve Wynn's stories. 2 moments I had with him in that recession when we had Blush and we had Society, and all of a sudden, overnight, I was, I had a deal where basically I received part of the profit of the establishment. And I went to Steve looking for kind of at dinner one night when really kind of the stuff hit the fan.
So what do? You just go over to Sinatra and
we're at SW. And I was sitting with him and I was looking for this compassionate, person to say, hey, look, you're Steve Wynn. Like, what do I do? He said 2 things. He said, don't do anything weird. And I said, okay. I said, what else? He said, pedal faster. And then he turned back to the person he was with and just kept talking. And that was like, his tidbit of advice, but that's always stood with me as well, which is, look, if you get into this business, opening these businesses are hard. Carver Steak is hard. Flanker is hard. Everything will be hard. It gets better. And the other thing is what I liked about the subtle comment that was a throwaway from him, but was prophetic for me, was don't do anything weird. I'm not trying to be, and this company is not trying to be anything other than it is, which is, this is what we do, whether it is hotels or restaurants or bars or clubs. It's about making people happy. And the outcome of that, if you're a professional, is, returning great returns to your investors, but they go hand in hand.
Yeah. You know what? You said something that will stay with me for the rest of my life. Pedal faster. I absolutely love that. When you're going uphill, you're on a bicycle and it's windy. I go over this bridge sometimes on my bike and you have to make a decision, right? Are you going to walk the bike or are you going to pedal faster? But it's a decision. And once you make the decision, people like us are going to make it up the hill because you made the decision to pedal faster. And I've never actually heard that. And I absolutely love it. And sometimes I get off the bike and I walk because I'm not in the mood. And then some days I'm like, the wind and the bridge ain't going to take me. I'm going up. And I've never stopped in the middle.
Yeah.
Either I don't attempt it or I win. And I think that that's a really interesting thing when you're running into a business is either don't do it, or when you do it, yeah, it's hard. And I love the fact that when you said hard, you didn't say hard, like you said hard, like you emphasized, because I know what that means. And when people say, well, it's hard. No, it's hard.
Yeah, it's soul crushing hard.
There you go. They're soul crushing.
So when it is so hard, how did you motivate yourself to get to the next day when you hoped it would be a little easier?
I think that, number one, you have to want it. How bad do you want it? You sit there and say, when I was a kid and I dreamed of, owning a restaurant because my dad did, or for me back then it was nightclub. Now it's whatever it might be. And then I think as time goes on, experience, you can fall back on your experience and say, okay, after you've done, honestly, I tell people I don't know how many places, I've kind of led the build of, but you can go back to the experience and say, okay, what was my worst experience and how did that end? If in all of them, which I've been fortunate enough to not have anything, in the end work, right? Nothing ever opened. Have had a couple major stumbles that came out of the gate. It might have taken 6 months to a year to really get going. But if you can fall back on, okay, how did something start? What was the challenge when it opened? And then how did we work through it? And what was that process? And when did it get better? when you have that type of experience and you have those, reference points in the catalog, you can go back on them and say, look, if you're willing to be flexible, work your butt off and make change. And again, how you start isn't how you finish. Again, the other thing you have to do is you just got to be open to change. Like as the curveballs come in, you got to be able to hit them.
You're talking something. It hit me when you first started talking, but it's really hitting me now. Is you're this good every Sunday Catholic kid that had a good family, raised you up, and you're in.
Well, my mom wouldn't tell you that. I missed a lot of church. My family went a lot. But I don't want my mom on the interview,
right?
What I'm saying is, you it seems like you had a decent childhood, right? You weren't in strip clubs at 12, right? So
until 13.
I was in nightclubs at 16.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. But my point being is,
back in the
after
day,
talking to you, it didn't seem like you would be the one in Vegas opening these places. And imagine the reason you're successful is because your ego's in check. It is really easy to become important. I used to run a hotel, and my wife used to hate coming to the parties because she said everybody working at this hotel thinks they're the guest. They think they're the one who's got the Bentley outside. They think they're special. And you seem to be, with all the trappings around you, you never lost your focus. How do you do that? How do you, with all the sexiness around you? And I always say I want to bring back sexy in the hotel business, not just in Vegas.
Oh, and just wait. The next thing we're going to talk about is just that.
So, all right. So I'll shut up then.
Sean, you want to answer that, and then we'll move on to that last
Yeah,
part?
I mean, look, everybody's journey in life is about, figuring out what everything is about. So fortunately for me, I do what I love. And that's probably one of the biggest blessings in my life, is that I was exposed to it by my, parents, my grandparents, and everybody always said, well, we know what he's going to do, even though I didn't even know that. But I think that when you combine, kind of your love for the business, and as you grow as a person, and, one of the things I had an encounter at Whole Foods, and I was with my daughter, and I was just realized early on that, when you work for bosses sometimes that can be really demanding or might have an ego, when you're at the grocery store and you're with your kid, all that goes away. So if there's a security guard or a ticket taker or whatever it might be, and you're, especially in this town, I'm sitting there and I'm, getting my pasta or whatever, and you bump into that person, I don't want to have an odd encounter on the street, because in the moment that I can be egotistical, I've chosen to take it. I just decided early on, I want to be able to look at people in the face and shake their hand, and none of us are different. And again, that's not ego, and you got to check it and you got to work at it. And I do a lot of work. I read a lot about things like that, which is just to say, like anything, you got to work at it. And all of this is a business for me. And I'm not in it at all for self publicity, even though I'm publicizing the company, but I'm in it for creating that wow for the guests. And they're a lot more wowed when you let them be the star and you're not the star.
That's a great piece of advice. Now, there were some people that were equally successful as you around the same time you first came onto the scene that I think went in a different direction.
Yep.
And they're no longer part of the Las Vegas community, for example.
Look, if you're around long enough, I'm sure in respective industries, I mean, Anthony, I'm sure you've seen people who are the darling children of, or, darling people of the hotel business 20 years ago, and they might be doing something different. I mean, this industry, hospitality, again, is hard, and you got to want it. And it's okay if you don't too, by the way. And a lot of people end up, just going on a different path, and that's okay. And the quickest way, in my opinion, to get out of this industry is to lose the faith of people who work with you, because, you somehow put yourself on a pedestal, kind of above them. That's one way to not attract talent.
Yeah. Don't you think during the pandemic, real quick, Glenn, during the pandemic, that Wynn keeping all their employees and paying all the benefits really long-term was genius?
Yeah, I think, look, each company's balance sheet is different. So if you got the money, and at that moment in time, it's tough to say, and of course, Wynn was leading the pack, if you will, in the response to the pandemic. But even people who didn't, kind of do that, if you've got a bigger company, like at the end of the day, look, Wynn is a massive company. And of course, everybody would point to them as saying kind of a leader of the pandemic and the job that Matt did. But even if you weren't one of those, each person, it's, in my opinion, sitting in multiple boardrooms at multiple companies at this point, kind of as a tenant, a managing partner, or as an exec, I've gotten to see different iterations of that. But until you're in those boardrooms and you understand those companies' challenges in finance, it's tough to kind of pick out the winners and the losers of how they handled. So I kind of don't comment on those things other than to say, yes, I believe that Wynn did an amazing job.
Yeah. Smart. Now, you already mentioned you're going to be in Salt Lake, and I know you have aspirations to be all around the country. Now, Anthony, this is great because in New York City, famed hotelier Jason Pomerank is creating a new hotel, the Civilian Hotel, and you guys have a deal with them. You're going to be doing food, beverage, rooftop bar, all sorts of cool stuff. Why don't you share a little on that?
Sure. So Anthony's neck of the woods, 48th and 8th, Jason opened Civilian Hotel. David Rockwell did the entire building. It's kind of a passion project for him and his company. It's kind of at the Hell's Kitchen Broadway and
it's
Times
no
Square.
longer Hell's Kitchen the way they transformed that neighborhood, right?
Well, that neighborhood is bustling, and I love the neighborhood, and it's a great location, and we're doing 2 concepts there. Kind of a bistro that elevates into a more refined experience at night, a cocktail room on the 2nd floor. Francesco Lafranconi works here with us. And so it's natural to do a cocktail room. Then we're doing the rooftop, which is kind of a musically driven concept that, will have great bites and things like that. So we're doing the F&B in that hotel open, our side of the business there open, but we'll open May, June.
Wow. That I was there 20 years ago when they were developing Inc. 48, where everybody said they were crazy. I was brought on to be the general manager, and then they lost their funding. And then I developed a hotel on 44th and 8th called, it was a branded hotel called the Staybridge. That was my last actually real development project in the city. And I got good news for you if you haven't been there already. Have you been to Capizzi's Pizza?
No, where is it?
It's right there. It's on 44th and 8th. It's you know where the bowling alley is, where the Port Authority is?
Well, yeah, we signed a lease for an office right over there on 43rd and 8th.
Okay, well, right across the street is Capizzi's.
Okay.
It's the best pizza in New York City. Joe is one of my dearest friends. I almost bought the place when I was developing that hotel.
Dude, where were you? Why didn't I know about this earlier? I just did a segment on the BT Talks Everything radio show yesterday talking about pizza. I could have included that.
I only tell my good friends about it.
No, I'm going to be checking that out the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. So, when you look at what Silverstein did over on 42nd and 10th and 11th and built the entire city, it's a city within the city there. You couldn't pick a better place to really build, not only for, people that come to the city, but for that residents need something in that area. And there's some amazingly great residents in that area. And I remember when Hell's Kitchen was going through the Renaissance back in the day, and everybody said, who would put money? My friend, actually, Tony Luke's from Philadelphia, the Tony Luke's cheesesteak. They had a Tony Luke's cheesesteak, and the guy bought the franchise and said, I'm not going to do Tony Luke's anymore. I'm going to do a place called Shorty's. Now, Shorty is a bar right on 9th Avenue. And my friend Leo said, that guy's going to go out of business. Said, that guy is going to do amazing. That community is now going to be the hottest place. So I can't wait to see it. It's called Civilian
Hotel. Yep. The hotel is open. As I said, the 2nd floor bar that we're doing is also open under a management contract until we, go through the state liquor authority. But that'll be open May, June. We're excited for it. And kind of being in New York City, also growing up in Boston was always a dream of mine. So when
that's cool,
Jason and I started talking, it seemed like a natural fit. And our chief business officer, who I worked with at Light Group, gentleman named Michael Ray, actually lives in New York. So, we had our roots there. We have several people already in the city. So it seemed like a great fit.
So Jason, wasn't he on our show, Glenn?
Which guest?
Jason
Jason
Pomerantz.
Pomerantz.
Wasn't he on our show?
Yes, I think so. But
Right in the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we
Yeah.
got to get him back on. Maybe when you guys are all
Yeah,
settled over there, we
absolutely.
come and do something from the rooftop up there.
That'd be great.
For sure. All right, so we're getting towards the end here, and I think we've really established you've been through such a big transformation here. You're opening this restaurant. You're opening more places now around the country. What are your overall goals and aspirations here for Carver Road Hospitality?
Yeah, I mean, our goals are to always to try to be the best. It's not to say that you are, it just gives you a goalpost to reach higher. And then I think as it relates to, there are certain companies that you look at in hospitality that do it right, which again is tricky in the sense that, well, what does that mean? But if you're in the industry, the companies that do it right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to be seen as a company that do it right. In the end, if you do it right and you make people happy, the money, as I said before, will be an outcome of that. And we just want to be one of those companies. I mean, we have our Carver Steak brand that we want to do in New York. Don't want to do that too quick, but we're looking around in New York right now. I think there's a natural fit there. And then the brand Flanker, which, as I talked about earlier, is next to the Vivint Arena, which is sports meets fun, meets destination, fun and food. We're actually, which again is behind me, we're doing a location that we're going to announce in a couple months in Las Vegas near the arena. And so really working on those brands. And then, we have a couple other things we're working on, but just to kind of grow smart. And at the end of the day, to be a company that everybody works here is proud of being affiliated with. Really, that's the goal. We're not sitting here other than I think that we've got several brands that are scalable.
Yeah.
But want to do that, just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should.
Are you looking for employees right now? Are you looking for staff?
Yeah, we're actually, so in New York, we hired our head chef. Her name's Jeannie Glass. She did the menu up at Flanker. She was with the Oshaval Hog Salt organization, and she came over to work with us. And, so in March, we're going to start really ramping up in terms of New York. And then probably in 2 more months, we'll start a big hiring process in Las Vegas for Flanker number 2.
So everybody listening to this, if you have friends and family looking for jobs, reach out to Sean. And it's so funny. We just had somebody post a comment on, and that gentleman was responsible for that evening I just talked about.
Yeah.
Or what he remembers of it.
Yeah, right.
Did you see who it was? Post it again, the last comment.
Yeah, Dr. Producer, you could pull that up.
There he goes.
Brian, what's up, Brian?
Brian was responsible for that evening of fun and trouble.
Oh, he's a fun guy, that's for sure. A great guy.
Yeah, hey Brian, reach out to me. I have never had these experiences.
He needs the Brian Dragovich experience.
This is terrible. I may have done some certain things with Mr. Newman though, but
but I'll be honest with you, it was just clean fun. It was just going to places. It wasn't like stupid, ridiculous stuff. I didn't go out to the Bunny Ranch or anything like that. It was just like
Girl Scout cookies.
Yeah,
right. It was just fun stuff. I was watching Cher, but it was just like I love going with somebody that knew the resort so well and brought me to play. I must have passed on the record 100 times going to Italy and going back. I love the Nomad, so I stay at the Nomad all the time. And so I passed it 100 times and no idea it was there. It was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great spot. Brian, obviously working with him was, one of the highlights working at Park. And I'm glad he dragged you up there.
Yeah. And now you're working with Shannon again, huh?
Shannon McCallum, who's running operations at Resorts World.
Yeah, I didn't know what Shannon.
She's a former, for people who don't know, she used to work at Aria in a similar capacity.
Worked with her over at Aria, and obviously have a lot of, when you've been in Vegas a long time, the great news is you get to work with a lot of people that in past lives or companies you get to work with, and Shannon obviously is amazing.
As big as this city seems, it's a small
Very
town for the
and you know what? It's the first time in being out to Vegas so many times in the last year, and doing the podcast for and getting to know all these people. Is I've been in the business in New York City for over 30 years, and the rhythm to Vegas hospitality is so much different than the rhythm in New York City. In New York City, it's everyone for themselves. In Vegas, there really seems to be, we're trying to help each other. Like you just said, really, beautifully, when I said Wynn, from where we sit, it's like, wow, Wynn took care of their employees, but everybody took care of their employees. And you answered it in the spirit of the way Vegas comes together. It's like, yeah, Wynn's financials were this, MGM's financials were this, and we all did the best we could, and everybody did the best they could for the city. Because if the city wins, everything wins. And I think Vegas did it better than anybody. They closed right away, and they opened up and never closed again.
Dude, it is so packed here right now. I cannot believe how many folks are here. It's absolutely incredible to see. And
coming back.
And now that the mandates have ended over here, it just feels more fun, more free.
Yeah, keep rubbing it in. I was in Vegas. Sean, I was in Vegas 16 times last year, and so Sean he knows I love Vegas, and it was all legitimate business. But I considered doing the podcast legitimate business, but for some reason, Glenn told me to stay in New York.
Yeah, that's exactly
what a friend.
That's exactly what I did.
It's 70 degrees here.
Yeah. Well, next time we come, and I'm sure we'll be back soon. I want to come to Carver.
Can't wait to
Unfortunately, Anthony really did have something that prevented him from coming all the way out here this week. Sean, any final words? And how about a good plug for Carver Steak and anything else that you want to?
Yeah, Carver Steak's open at Resorts World. If you want to reach me, it's Sean@carverroad.com. And I'm excited to have a big fan of the podcast. Have always been, just FYI.
I appreciate it.
Love Hotel Impossible.
Thank you.
So excited to just be part of this. And other than that, can't wait to see everyone at Flanker in Salt Lake City, at Roseville in New York City, or Carver Steak in Resorts World.
Excellent. Awesome. Sean, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.
And shoot me your cell number in the private messaging, please.
Will do.
Yeah, I'll get it to you. Don't worry. All right. So Anthony, what a great one.
No, if he doesn't do it now, we're going to both forget. So Sean, please do it.
All right.
You got it.
Yeah. Don't worry. I promise we will take care of it.
Okay.
All right. Let's get out of here because he's sitting here. It's always fun when we have the guest sitting and staring at me and feeling awkward and stuff like that. So I want to thank everyone for being here. We got a lot of great shows this week. We'll be on location on Thursday and Friday. On Thursday at Resorts World up in on the 66th floor, and on Friday from Carver Steak. So thanks so much for being here. Also, be sure to download our audio version of our podcast. We're in the top 1/2% of all audio podcasts globally, people. Get in on the action. Find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you like to download your shows. Well, we are there for you. Reach out to us personally. He's at Anthony Hotels. I'm at Traveling Glenn. Any final words of wisdom, Anthony?
No, my brother. I miss you, man. Are we over our fight, by the way?
Yeah. I was just at the NEWH leadership conference, and it was like one thing after another. I just didn't have a chance to call you and wrap this up.
Me and Greg got into our second fight, but we're over it.
Yeah. But what's really good is we fight hard, we fight fast, and move on quick. So that's the best. And remember,
it's so funny. The first time I ghosted you for a couple of days, I was like, I was so mad at you, and then you ghosted me for a couple of days. I was like, that son of a bitch has ghosted me.
Yeah. Right. And one thing we will never do is ghost you, our loyal viewer. Thanks so much for being here. Remember, you've got one life, so blaze on and
be kind to yourself.
See you tomorrow.
You ghoster.